Unfortunately, I've been here for every other one.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just one that you were that before, but I'm sure I felt like you one.
It's like a treat every week. You like everyone to miss you for the week, for the month, and then you know.
You got to take something away to realise just how great it is.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, I can't even pretend that I believe what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No, that's not how I want to start off the tasting.
I please you well. So welcome to everybody for this on this wonderful Thursday evening. You said it's raining by where you are, Jess.
Yeah, I just started absolutely chucking it down like 5 minutes. I was in my kitchen finding my tasting glasses and suddenly it was like pitch black. And the clouds came over and like there was thunder and I was like just trying to find some tasting glasses. But
I think summer is over. I hope it's better where you guys are, but here in London, for me, it feels like it's summer is over. Good evening, everybody. Steve Coleman Williams, welcome back. Good evening, all. Malcolm Tucker, welcome back. Good evening from me, Anthony Mullins, welcome back. Evening, one and all. Jeffster, evening. First one for a few months. Where have you been? Missed the 2-a-month ones. Yes, we do as well. Pour and sip. Good evening. That's good honour. Steve Coleman is asking what we're all warming up with. Steve is warming up with the Talisker Sky. Lovely. Anthony Mullins is warming up on Coke, I'm afraid. Coca-Cola, that is, just what they're saying. And TACD, evening, everybody. And Richard Wingrove, good evening. Yes, hello. Welcome back, everybody. And to any of our new subscribers who are joining us for our your first tasting, excuse me. Welcome. Please get involved with all your comments. Let us know what you think of the whiskies. Let us know your tasting notes. There's no note that's too silly, so please just let us know. We love hearing your tasting notes. Please let us know if you've got any questions for our guests. There's, again, no question that's too silly. We'll happily answer.
That is why they're here.
Exactly. That is why they're here, to answer your questions. And we've got 3 fabulous guests tonight, and we're trying 5 amazing whiskies. So, Jess, do you want to do the order of play?
Yes. So, first of all, I am going to be talking to Martha about Never Say Die, which is a bourbon, but it's not bourbon as you know it. I'll keep it mysterious. And then, Andy, you'll be moving on to Michter's with... I'm so sorry I missed the intros because I was finding my tasting glasses. Mikey,
who is replacing Nathan.
That rolls off the tongue really nicely. Michter's with Mikey.
Mikey from Michter's.
And then after 2 American extravaganzas, I'll be moving into Campbeltown to chat with Fiona about the Campbeltown Loch blended malt.
Lovely stuff.
And
then after that, we are going to have a very, very quick whistle-stop tour of the last 2 drams, which we unfortunately don't have guests for. But I will be talking a little bit about the Boulder Peated Malt, American single malt whiskey, and Jess will be talking about the Kingsbarn Bluecott. Yes, very good. Remember, guys, it's pour and sip. You don't need to drink all of these in one night. 5 is a lot of drams to drink. If you want to just savor any of those last ones and just drink them another time, feel free. Or if you just want to have a couple of sips and then save the rest, absolutely fine. Steve Hickson saying, evening all, just had a 4.5k run. Now time for whiskey. Wonderful stuff, Stephen. Well done. The whiskey is well deserved. So without further ado, I think it's we can start the extravaganza now. So I'm going to invite Martha onto the screen.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, hello. I will leave you in the capable hands of Jess, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.
Cheers, Andy. Good evening. It's so good to see you. How are you this evening?
I'm very good. Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So to everyone watching right now, Martha and I just discovered we are about 10 houses apart from each other in South London. So if we'd known earlier, this could have been a rare in-person chat, which would have been amazing.
Yeah, exactly. The classic London thing where you have no idea until you go online and then suddenly you realise that you're a couple of meters away from each other.
So we'll just pretend. But yes, so we're here to talk about Never Say Die, which I find so interesting. And I'm not sure if many people shout on the chat if you guys have heard of Never Say Die before. You got this set because it's pretty new to the whiskey world. I mean, we'll start before we get onto the whiskey. Let's start with you,
okay?
Because you are co-founder of Never Say Die, which is pretty amazing. So, what before the journey of the whiskey, which is incredible? What was your journey into the whiskey world?
Well, I'm a political campaigner and kind of communications consultant by trade, and have a business with someone called David Wild. And he went to the Kentucky Derby with one of his friends, Pat Madden. They hadn't seen each other for about 30 years. They went to the Kentucky Derby, and Pat's from a big horse racing family. And he was talking about this amazing horse that was born on his farm, that almost died when it was born. And in a last roll of the dice, the horseman said, "We're going to put some bourbon up its nose, and it's either going to kill it or save its life." And luckily in the morning, it was running around the pen. So, thank God for that. And, David was there. They were all getting quite merry, drinking mint juleps as you do at the Kentucky Derby. And David thought, right, we just need to make a bourbon and call it Never Say Die. So he got back to London and said, "Martha, we're going to make a whiskey." And we were like, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. And so basically pulled together an absolutely cracking team, and raised the money to do it. And, here we are.
So how long ago was that the idea was born?
That was in 2016, and we made our first, we filled our first barrels in 2017.
Oh, wow. You wasted no time.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was pretty cool. And then obviously we launched last autumn with a kind of 5 and a bit year old. So, it felt like quite a long time in the making, because obviously you're kind of working away at it, and you don't get to see anything.
Well, and a lot happened in that time as well. I can imagine that, not that, you'd think that launching a whiskey brand is going to be plain sailing, but it surely very much was not what you had in mind.
No, and we had this thing where there were the bourbon tariffs that really got in our way, and it was actually quite. So we obviously left the European Union, and as someone who wasn't a supporter of Brexit, I thought that getting out of the bourbon tariffs might be something that might be the silver lining for me. But actually what happened was we left the European Union, and the European Union did a deal with America, and the UK were the only ones left with this 25% extra tariff. Yeah. So we were pretty pissed off about that, but decided that because, my background is a political campaigner, we set up something called the Bourbon Alliance, worked with everyone in the industry, all of the big brands, colleagues over in the States, and basically ran a big campaign to try and get politicians to sort out the tariffs, which they did, which was incredible, and a lot of hard work. And, it was great to work with everyone in the industry, because, as you know, just everyone is so nice and actually really supportive and collaborative. So that was really like a nice way into the industry as a newbie to it. And then we managed to, put our first barrels from the States over to the UK the day after the tariffs came off. So
yes, wow. Again, no time wasted. I mean,
we had them all ready to go.
Well, I mean, leading on from that, I mean, it's quite a cool backstory anyway, with the horse and the farm and the connections to Pat and then David and everyone coming together. But I mean, you'll talk this through much better than I can, but the barrels are part of the process. The aging process is that the barrels are shipped from the US to the UK. I mean, why it's a first for one, and what made you decide to do that?
A couple of reasons. One, we just really loved the idea of being really true to the brand story, because it is such, it's a real story, and it's one connected to, one of our co-founders. We didn't want to mess it up. We wanted to not cut any corners, and we just loved the idea of the fact that we had this horse that was born in Kentucky that then travelled over the ocean and won an English derby in front of the Queen and Winston Churchill. We just love the idea of our liquid following in on the same journey. But then also from a kind of experimental point of view, we just thought it'd be really, really interesting to see what 3 climatic conditions would do to a whiskey. Because obviously you've got the really hot weather in Kentucky in the summer, And then you've got, essentially the barrels being sloshed around on the ocean, and then coming to our barrels then go to an English whiskey distillery called White Peak in the Peak District. And so that kind of cooler climatic condition again. And I think that, we wanted to see what that would do. And we're really, really pleased with the results. And we do think it's not a gimmick. It really does change it changes the liquid significantly. And often when we do tastings, we have what it tastes like before it leaves Kentucky, and then what it tastes like, once we put it into the bottle, and it does taste very different.
Yeah. Well, so I actually I visited White Peak for Never Say Die for launch, and I think you never get the chance to taste whiskey in this way, because there were all these single barrels, and like the difference between, I guess, where it is in a rick house is one thing, but also where it is on then a boat for that long. And the difference was incredible. Like some of them tasted like pure cardamom, and the other one was like the butteriest thing you've ever had.
Yeah.
And it was just so amazing. And it was like, that was so lucky that I got to taste those next to each other. I mean, obviously today we have just one single barrel, which we'll have to make do with. But yeah, I mean, are you going to start releasing? I guess it works so well as a single barrel release, is what I'm saying, because you have those differences. But would you ever have a sort of continuous release of an Never Say Die?
Yeah, so we've got a small batch bourbon that's just been released as our kind of next expression. And when we mean small batch, we mean really small. So each batch is only 10 barrels that have been blended together. And so we had someone do a taste all of the barrels that we had in the UK and mark them based on 5 indicators. So, cardamom being one, caramel, etc., vanilla, and basically work out what would be the best blend. So we've got with that, in the UK now and about to be on a boat. So it'll be available in America soon as well.
Oh, very good. So you have to ship it back.
So basically we're bottling it here, but then it's going to, the US is becoming an export market for us. Yeah. But they'll be having bottled in the UK.
Yeah. You're not repeating the process. That would take time. I am going to get my glass out as well, because it seems criminal that we haven't had a sniff yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone, Jeffster, is asking, so it's around 4 and 5 years old, and he's commenting that it's very dark for the age. Would you attribute that to the sort of ocean aging?
Well, so what people have in their glasses was just under 5 years in Kentucky, and then it was 6 weeks on a boat, and then it was, I can't remember exactly when this one was bottled, but it would have been probably at least 6 months in the UK. So it's kind of 5.5, a bit more than that. But I think that obviously when it's sloshed around in those charred oak barrels, you're really going to be getting the liquid into the oak. And I think that's what gives it the unique flavor profile for sure.
Yeah, sorry, I was just having a taste. Do you have a favorite barrel, or is that?
Yeah, I do. Barrel 2 is my absolute dream bourbon. It's just incredible. Yeah. Because we're a high rye, so we're 21% rye, which is where you kind of get that kind of more the spicier notes from. But barrel 2 is just the absolute kind of quintessential, beautiful, smooth, round, kind of quite sweet bourbon. Yeah.
We're getting some tasting notes already as well. So we've got Steve Colin Williams is getting fresh hay, but he doesn't know if it's a suggestion from the story.
Okay. Yeah.
Apricots and black pepper. Malcolm Tucker is also getting apricot with oak and vanilla. How many have we got? Anthony Mullins, beautiful, gorgeous color, beautiful sweet vanilla on the nose. Everyone's commenting on the color. Everyone's really impressed, actually. I would agree. It's hard to judge a book or a whiskey by its cover anyway, but I think it would surprise a lot of people to find out that this was, like 5-ish years old.
Yeah. And I think for us, we knew that we had an amazing brand story, but we absolutely wanted to make sure that we knocked it out of the park with the liquid. We didn't want to be one of those vacuous brands. We want, and so we're really proud of what's in the bottle as well.
There's something that would be good to sort of explain and clarify, I guess, which Steve Colin Williams has just asked. He goes, to be clear, this is a bourbon.
Yes.
Even though it's bottled in England, you are very much calling it a bourbon. It is a bourbon, obviously. I mean, what are the sort of legalities around that, and how, because for Scotch, obviously, that would be not allowed.
Yeah, so we meet all of the criteria to call ourselves a Kentucky straight bourbon. So basically, we're produced in the USA in Lexington. We're made from a grain mix of at least 51% corn, aged in new charred oak barrels, distilled at no more than 80 ABV. And there are various kind of other kind of ABV things as well that we meet. So when it leaves Kentucky, it's absolutely a Kentucky straight bourbon. It's just that we don't finish the process there.
Mm-hmm. And that's not, but I mean, no bourbon has to be bottled in Kentucky. It just usually is, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, we're just slightly, we're disrupting the market in that no one's ever done this before. And when we tried the bourbon, when it got to the UK, we were thinking, hopefully people haven't done, hopefully this isn't a completely mad thing that, if we've ruined the bourbon. But no, I think it's just that no one's ever done it before.
Yeah, I mean, well, one, the time, and two, I don't know, the story. No one had the link, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And I've noticed that there is a new brand that I saw that came onto my radar last week that I think are doing something similar but further maturing in Wales. So it seems interesting that we set a trend. Yeah.
I mean, that's the highest form of flattery for sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going back to the beginning-ish here, but was there a reason you went for a high rye bourbon rather than not?
I think that we just wanted something. It was something that we all just felt quite passionate about. I'd always been quite a fan of a rye, and we have a rye coming out in the autumn actually. But we thought that a Kentucky straight bourbon with a high rye would, make it quite punchy. And we thought that the fact that it was going to be further matured in the UK, we thought would hopefully kind of give it that kind of smoother finish. And I think that's right, because considering it's a high rye and it's, obviously barrel strength, it is pretty smooth.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think I would not have guessed. It's spicy, but it's more attributed to, I think the grain than it is to the ABV, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Got some more tasting notes as well. We've got Jess with licorice and peaches on the nose. A lot of stone fruits coming through. Everyone's getting apricots and peaches, which, I mean, what would you attribute that to? That's just sort of the sweetness of the cask.
Yeah, I think so. I think again, it's just that with the sloshing on the kind of the ocean aging, you do just get a lot. I think you get a lot of the kind of really interesting flavour coming out of the oak that way.
Yeah, we've got dried apricot, ginger, and cinnamon spice on the nose.
Yeah,
Anthony Mellon's spicy, but still with the creamy sweetness alongside. And this is high praise because Steve Colin Williams was tempted with a bourbon last week, said he didn't like bourbon, but now has found one that he likes at long last.
Okay, well, there we go.
Kudos for trying it, I guess. As well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for giving it a go. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and then we've got Clive saying it's smooth and spicy if that's possible, which
yeah, it is possible, and I think that for me that's definitely how it tastes. And I think that if you delve into the portfolio of the different barrels, like you were saying, there are some that are kind of more towards the spicy end, and then others that are really, really sweet, in a good way sweet, that are more the kind of the caramel candy floss kind of things. So I think there's something for everyone in there.
Yeah, I do think there's maybe not as much as some, but there is this really lovely like underlying herbal note that sort of just gives it a bit of depth. I think people assume that bourbon is all sweetness.
Yeah.
And obviously this, it has spice. I mean, for me, it has a sort of like a herbal spice, like a cardamom kind of note. And it's sweet without being saccharine.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be pure butterscotch, which is lovely. but it's nice to have other things in there too.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a bit more interesting than that, and it means that it can be a sipping bourbon, but it also means that it can, if you want to put it into a cocktail, it is going to hold its own. It's not going to fade into the background.
What do you usually drink it in?
Well, I'm very keen on a Boulevardier, I must say. But then, just the classics, an old fashioned,
Yeah.
Is always good.
Yeah, I can imagine this as well being particularly good after dinner.
Yeah.
Because it's got that like the richness alongside the sweetness. I think it would, like, even just not in a cocktail, but after an old fashioned would be so nice.
Yeah, exactly. We went to the Epsom Derby this year with all of our American investors who originally invested in our brand, and we were drinking the new small batch with grapefruit and also with ginger beer, and it was just really great for kind of just kind of steady drinking throughout the day in the sunshine. Watching the horse racing.
It sounds idyllic. Surely that's exactly how Never Say Die is meant to be.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And there was a horse. So for those that don't know, Never Say Die became a champion racehorse and was the first American racehorse to ever win an English Derby, and did so in 1954. And because it was such a rank outsider, it was at 33-1. And there was a woman up in Liverpool called Mona Best who pawned all of her jewellery and put it all on Never Say Die and won big, and basically used that money to buy her son and his friends some instruments, and set up something called the Casbah Club in Liverpool. And basically that's what launched the Beatles. Which is kind of just like the crazy other bit of the story. And then when we were watching the Epsom Derby this year, there was a horse at 33-1, and obviously us all thinking, wow, this is totally serendipitous. We all need to put money on it, and it came in.
No.
So, drink Never Say Die and you'll be lucky. Here.
Oh my gosh. It's like genuinely full circle. You can't
it was really weird. Yeah.
That's so funny. Oh, what was the horse called? I'm so intrigued.
I have no idea. I think I may have
you just saw the odds and you were like,
just focus on 33-1, exactly.
We have a question through from Jester that says that I assume that these are first use casks, but what are you doing with the empties?
Aha, so good question. Because we basically have got this really great partnership with White Peak Distillery, and we just love what they do, the passion that they put into their product, and so we're storing our barrels there, and basically they're going to use our freshly kind of emptied barrels for some of their new expressions. So that's what's happening. Yeah, and it's exciting for them as well, because normally when you get barrels, they've been dismantled, they've been completely cleaned, whereas ours are going to, they're going to be freshly dumped. So there's probably going to be like 3 bottles of booze, just in the wood.
They'll be still wet, surely.
Yeah, totally.
In the same place.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really exciting. So that there'll be that kind of sort of informal collab coming out in the future.
I think the transparency there is really good as well. I think when you're launching a brand and a whiskey like this, you probably do have to have a fair bit of transparency because it is something that people have never done before. I imagine, have you had to explain the sort of concept of like England's bourbon to a lot of people because are people suspicious?
I mean, I think it's deliberately provocative, obviously. And we launched at the Whiskey Show in London last autumn, and we had it up on our, on the backdrop of our booth, and a lot of people came over, either intrigued or maybe a little bit cross or whatever, but it ended up being a really good conversation starter. And once people got into the thing of, we're not breaking any laws around, calling it a Kentucky straight bourbon when it's not, then people were really interested in it. And I think as soon as people tried it, they were happy with what they were tasting. Yeah.
That is, I mean, that does say all, doesn't it?
Yeah. But I think the thing that I think it'll be really interesting to see what the reception is like in the States. So that will be kind of, that's the next step for us, basically. So we'll be launching in America. It's about to get the boat. So in the next couple of months.
Oh wow, that's so exciting.
Mm.
Would you I mean, I was going to ask what's next, but that seems like enough to be getting on with.
So that's that, but then we've also got, at the moment, it got picked up from the distillery in Kentucky today, actually. We've got a shipment of rye that's going to be coming over to the UK. So, and I've not tried that for quite a few months. So it'd be interesting to see what that tastes like after its journey on the ocean. So we'll be hoping to launch that in the autumn.
Oh wow, not too long then.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
You haven't tried it post sort of ocean journey yet?
No.
Oh no. Or you have, sorry.
No, I haven't. No, we don't have any rye in the UK at the moment, so no barrels have been ocean aged yet.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so it's always a little bit nerve-wracking, but exciting.
Yeah. I mean, how many barrels do you put in each shipment?
Roughly about 100 barrels.
Okay. Which isn't huge.
No.
In the grand scheme of whiskey, that's not very many.
No, exactly. But I mean, we've got a reasonable amount, but we're trying to just be careful with what we do. We're trying to be quite deliberate in terms of the releases that we do and making sure that everything that we do is really high quality. So.
Yeah, I mean, well, if each batch of your continuous sort of release is only 10 barrels, there's not a lot of room for error.
No, exactly. Yeah.
The tasting notes are still coming as well. We've got real Glengyle with tastes of apricots and peaches, swimming in honey, and a hot spice overlayer, which is very evocative.
Nice, yeah.
Malcolm Tucker's getting a little spearmint, which I feel like is quite classic for bourbon. Cereal notes followed by chili heat. Steve agrees it will go well in old fashioned. Ali's got lots of long peppery rye spice mellowed with almost creamy ginger. Love that note. Creamy ginger and burnt citrus oil.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I think I get citrus. So yeah, I can relate to those tasting notes.
Yeah, although it's interesting that you were kind of saying that your favorite is barrel number 2, which is on the sweeter side from the sound of things.
Yeah, no, it definitely is on the sweet. I think it's just like the absolute, like for me, it's probably the nicest bourbon I've ever tried, in that it's just like totally the classic, amazing one. But then the British Bourbon Society, for example, they went and chose a barrel, and they had the first ever release, actually, ever. And the one that they chose was very high ABV and really interesting, which I also loved. So yeah.
Very nice. I don't know where the time's gone, but somehow our time is up.
Okay, cool.
But thank you so much. I mean, I'm going to keep this for later. But yeah, if you could stay around to the end, that'd be amazing. Can't remind to finish the whiskey or something.
Yeah, no, cool. And thank you everyone for your tasting notes. It's really lovely to hear.
Yes, yeah, thank you so much.
Evening. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. I think Andy will fly back.
I have to join on first, and then.
Okay, sorry, getting the format wrong.
That was lovely, and as you said, this was my first dram in a week, so that was a nice wake up call. But as you were saying, it doesn't taste like was it 53.2? It was that sweet and spicy. It was really, really lovely stuff and interesting dram. So thank you very much for joining us, Martha, and we'll see you soon.
Welcome. Take care. Bye.
What a start, eh?
I know, flying out of what do racing horses fly out of?
Yes, good with the puns. Yes, very good.
Cool. It would have been good if I could finish the sentence. Someone help.
Yes, all good. Well, I think that moves us on to our next dram.
Indeed.
So
staying in the US.
Mikey onto the screen. How's it going?
Hola, it's going pretty well.
Awesome. Good to hear. Well, we're going to lose Jess for a bit, but you won't lose her forever. She will be reappearing soon.
See ya.
So we'll see you in a bit. Goodbye, Jess. Awesome. Cool. We're talking to you from You're in Bethnal Green at the moment.
I am indeed. Yes.
You are indeed. Yeah. Exactly. Well, cool. Nice to meet you. And we'll talk to us a little bit about yourself and just how you got into the whiskey industry and into your current role.
Sure. Well, I moved over to the UK in the year 2000. I'm originally from Canada. I studied archaeology, But when I graduated, we had a little thing, which I think people are probably familiar with now, called a recession. So I walked into a pub to start earning money and haven't really left the booze industry since. I went from working in pubs to cocktail bars to brewing beer commercially to eventually making whiskey. I used to work for a distillery not too far from where I live for a little while. And then about a year ago, a friend of mine, Nathan, who I am covering today, asked if I wanted to work for his company as he looked after more brands. And I said yes. And so now I get to talk about pretty much, I know I work for them, so obviously everything I say with a pinch of salt, but the portfolio for specialty brands with whiskey is, I don't want to say bulletproof, but like there's no misses. It's all good stuff. So
it's all hits.
Yeah. So I said yes, and it's been a pretty good year so far. So
okay, yeah.
Touch wood.
And that's an interesting mix, I have to say. Archaeology to whiskey. That's we've heard a few here. Of course, that we've had full-time professional boxer to whiskey producer. That was a good one. We've had lots of interesting career journeys. But yeah, archaeology to whiskey, that's a really good one.
I mean, most archaeologists I know drink heavily. So
I suppose in any job, really, there's a line of whiskey if you enjoy drinking. So that's for sure. Awesome. So we're talking about speciality, but we're talking today about Michters is one of the drams you cover. So for anyone who doesn't know about the distillery and it's like history in American whiskey, it's quite significant. And can you share a little bit of that story with us and why it's been decided to revive the brand as well?
Yeah. So Michter's originally, okay, I'll try not to be boring. America, everyone thinks about bourbon, rye, and whiskey first. America's first post-contact, I guess I should say, native spirit was actually rum. So rum was one of the things, especially that the government purchased and distributed. And there was a farmer by the name of last name of Schenk, who was a Mennonite, who came to the States in Pennsylvania and grew rye so well that he had a large surplus. And it would surprise nobody listening to me to learn that when you have a surplus of anything, you tend to either turn it into booze or ferment it into things like kimchi. And so he did. The former, not the latter, obviously. But he did it to great success, and it was the first American whiskey purchased by the government, in this case George Washington, and given to the troops after the Battle of Valley Forge. So it's legally the first American, it's the oldest and first American registered trademark distilling company.
Wow.
It changed hands a few times, went over to a guy named Baumberger, who actually released the world's first ever commercial sour mash whiskey, which is more to do with the process of whiskey making rather than telling you what the whiskey tastes like. Changed hands again to a guy named Lou Foreman. He's the one who renamed it. So Michter's itself is a portmanteau of Michael and Peter. So his two sons.
I did not know that.
So although my name is Michael, and I thought a portmanteau would be Mike Eater. But forget I said that because I work for the company, so it's Michter's.
Yeah.
And then post-prohibition, the company went basically bankrupt. So the trademark for the name was up. And so a family called the Magliocos, they own the only off license, essentially the only what do you call it? What do they call it in the States? Liquor license for the island of Manhattan. And so several members of the family wanted to get into whiskey for quite a long time. I think it was Joseph who found that the trademark was up and it was basically about to be completely dissolved. So he bought it for like $200 or something ridiculously tiny. And then they decided once they had the trademark to revive the brand. And so they did as most people who want to get into whiskey do. They started by buying barrels and using their expertise to pick out particularly good single releases. That went so well that they could then pay to do what are called contract distillations. So you don't own the distillery, but whoever is distilling booze has enough time and space to make stuff to your specifications, and they do. That went amazingly well, and then they eventually built a distillery, which is now, it has been for quite a while, fully functioning in Louisville, Kentucky, and now Michters produce all of their own stuff. They actually also grow quite a lot of their own corn, which is rare for whiskey producers. Yeah,
I was about to say, does that exist at all? Is that how many other people do that?
It's not unheard of. It's just rarer. A lot of the times, like the malting warehouses in Scotland, when you grow corn, you tend to send it to the equivalent of a malting warehouse. So you can have traceability for corn. It's not something that's paramount, I think, in most whiskey producers' minds. So it does exist in a few places. Balcones uses a particular Texas whiskey, uses a variety of blue corn. but I can't think of any other brands who really have a direct line to their own.
I mean, I suppose that's something that could be a future progression, because obviously in Scotch it's becoming more, you know, we're talking about provenance of barley, which wasn't really spoken about at all before. So I wonder, you know, if that's something that could happen in the future when talking about corn and those other grains we're using.
I think if companies, especially like Waterford, who are doing that,
Bruichladdich,
Ireland. And the guy who opened Waterford used to own Bruichladdich. So
exactly. So Mark Rayner is definitely pioneering this movement. But anyway, that kind of moves us on to, when talking about that, you know, moves us to that, so this kind of cost be damned philosophy. Talk to us about that and the freedom it gives in the production process of creating Michters.
So I can only really tell you this through the schema of a Canadian. If you go to their website and you look at it, it kind of reads like an old Chevrolet truck commercial. Where they're like, we only hand select our grains and we distill by moonlight. And we throw our hats in the air and shoot them. They do actually pretty much look at every single part of the whiskey making process and try to make, I know bang for buck. I don't mean to sort of cheapen it by saying that, but try to make the absolute best on the bell curve of cost for money whiskey that they can possibly do.
Yeah.
So when it comes to things like any one of them, really, the bourbon or the rye or the sour mash or the American unblended, when they bring in grains, rather than look for really how much sugar is in it, which is how much alcohol you'll get out of it, look at things like enzyme and fat content, which affect flavor. They affect your overall yield. So not many people bother to go for things that are high in enzyme and fat content. They also are pretty strict and cool about their barrel programs and how they grow the wood and how slowly they dry that wood. They toast on top of charring the wood. They do a lot of things which I think not unnecessary. Obviously, the whiskey's delicious, and I'm glad they do all these things. You can make perfectly good whiskey by picking one or two of the things that they do, but they have just decided that if they're going to bother reviving this brand and putting their name to it, then it should be the best possible thing they can do, and they really are pulling out all the stops.
Absolutely, and you can definitely see that. I like the bottle design as well. It feels premium as well in comparison to other kinds of, you know, like when talking of other, it just feels, the look of it is premium. So there's old school as well.
Also, this is part of the thing they bought. So this font and this actual picture, this is the original branding of it. So this is all the thing that cost $200 and whatever it was dollars originally.
It's very cool. So talk to us about what is the kind of that. So we've spoken. There's the bourbon, the rye, the sour mash. Cheers, everybody. Yeah, we'll get onto the rye that we're tasting right now. Are you drinking the rye right now? Are you drinking?
Indeed. Yep, it's my favorite one. So.
Cool. But what is the kind of Michters, like the house style? What kind of characterize it and makes it unique?
So, it's tough to say. There's a couple things. I mean, really, if you want to get whiskey nerdy, I would say go to the website and then look up everything they talk about.
Sure.
A couple things I think that they do that are not unique to them, but they do a few things in tandem that sort of make the whiskey. Oh, do I think this? I think I do. Really, really good as like a benchmark.
Sure.
For American whiskeys. If you're into Scotch, if you're into Irish or Japanese or any other world whiskeys, and you want to taste what certain categories sort of are known for having and good examples of them, I think Michter's pretty much the bourbon and the rye are phenomenal. And bang for buck, I think like 56 quid for a bottle. Yeah. There are bourbons that are as good that cost twice as much.
Sure.
I don't know of anybody at that price point that really, for me anyway, hits that exact bell curve of what I'm looking at of an American whiskey. And one of the things that I like about their process is, they do it for almost everything, but for the bourbons in particular, if you don't know, bourbon's got to be primarily corn, and they have to use new charred American oak, and all the sweetness in American whiskey actually comes from the wood. So when you char the inside of an oak barrel, what you do is you actually kind of break down some of the sugars, and the alcohol in the water can then suck it out. And bourbon's always known for being sweeter, but if you, and this is, pardon me if this is boring, but if you dry the wood slowly and then also toast it, the same way you would do bread, so you're not just charring one side of it, you're actually toasting all the way through. The pores separate, you get the alcohol penetrating into deeper facets of the wood, and you do get more sugar, but you also get a lot more of those rich, sort of complex vanillins, a lot of those kind of punchy, chewy tannins that kind of make for a better, well-rounded American spirit. Mm-hmm. And I say this in clear knowledge, like, to me, American whiskeys are big punches of flavor, and the sugar kind of bridges them. It's what you'd expect Americans to be like. I heard you like coconut, heard you like vanilla, heard you like spice.
We're not dealing in subtlety here.
It's just bam, bam, bam of all those things. Yeah. And having just sugar can bleed those things together. If it's wood sugar in tandem with the tannins that the barrel naturally has, it all It just makes a more cohesive spirit. So the treatment of the barrels is definitely, it's not their only thing, but it's one of the things I think really stands out. So when you have the rye, although it's got that spice you want from that grain, you still have this nice sort of mellow, very well blended together sweetness that has woody notes to it, but isn't just a one-trick pony, so to speak.
Well, let's talk about the rye, because that's what we're about to start drinking. Let's talk about the mash bill that was going on here, and let's talk about this dram. And someone's actually asked a question about it before we get onto it, and saying how, where has it gone? There's a much darker colour on the Michters. It's lovely than the Never Say Die. Is any colouring added? Is it all from the barrel?
You can't in the States. If you add coloring, it becomes an American blended whiskey, which we won't see over here because we don't legally classify them as whiskeys. Darker color has color can be affected by age, but if it is the first time that barrel has been filled, one of the first things that will come out of these really punchy short tannin, the same things that are in tea, the same tannins essentially, and they're one of the things that adds color first. Once oxygen hits that, it gets a lot browner. So if you're using new oak, you'll get darker spirits faster. So no coloring added. It's just the natural, the wood. I say natural, as it is to cut down a tree and make a barrel to start put the spirit into the barrel. It's as natural as it gets, I think.
And this is straight rye, actually. So we're talking.
So so age statements with American whiskeys are tough. What you're having in here is, I think, about 6 years old. Mash bill wise and age wise, especially when it comes to the rye, it doesn't vary wildly. You're kind of looking at like Venn diagrams, but because they operate good grain selection and they're always looking at starch versus everything else, it's never one specific mash bill. I'd say year on year, but even really delivery by delivery. And the ryes in particular are always single barrel.
Okay.
So I'm sure you guys know you can put single barrel on your bottle and it doesn't legally mean anything. You can blend 400 million liters together and call it single barrel if you want. In Michter's case, when it says single barrel, what you're looking at is actually it's one barrel of rye that I thought was good enough to release as their rye. So the mash bills chop and change a little bit. Obviously, the wood, again, you're looking at Venn diagrams. Some things will be mildly spicier. Some things will have more complex vanillins. But the rye is one of the things that is just I don't know what to call it, like a real bellwether for how good their products are.
Is there like a kind of a ballpark figure that kind of separates that is like kind of the Michter's standard? You know, like you'll get to like a Four Roses kind of as a standard. We'll use their kind of mash bill. Is there something Michters do with their rye as well, or is it?
Like you mean mash bill wise?
Yeah.
They don't tell us anything. That's
really?
Just I can tell you from my experience in distilling what I think it is.
Yeah.
But I have no basis other than the ryes I was making in a different country.
Sure.
But I'm pretty sure they do long fermentations for their rye. So you're probably looking at more than 2 days.
Yeah.
Because rye, no matter what you do, will always have that nice capsicum with that kind of slight black peppery spice. Yeah. If you ferment it long enough, you'll also get these kind of like, this might be wanky, so I apologize.
Oh, no.
But those custard apple, like it's fruit, but it's not like, the barrels can make it stone fruity, but it's got this nice like apple skin kind of slightly tart note to it. And I would wager it's probably in 60s. In my head, I think it's 66, 67-ish rye, but I don't know what the rest of the grains are like. So I reckon it's around that level. They also, though, whenever they use grains, obviously the corn they grow themselves. So far, they don't use wheat. One of the things they do that is kind of unique to their setup is their tertiary grain will be barley. So it's expensive. Not many people bother to use it. And barley, most people don't think of it this way because they think of single malts as being king, but barley is very good at lifting other flavors, depending on what you're doing with it. So
and cost be damned, so it doesn't matter. So
yeah, so most people would have, if they use barley, the bottle would probably cost 80 to 90 quid. They use enough to help lift everything else rather than for the namesake, so to speak.
Absolutely, and that's awesome. And but for someone who's not like, what should we expect from a rye whiskey for someone who's not tried it? I know we haven't had many rye whiskies here at Port and Sip.
Rye whiskey is the thing you'll hear all bartenders, all producers say is spice. So it will always have this nice kind of slightly, sometimes white pepper, sometimes black pepper spice to it. That tends to dry out the finish. So even if it's seamed, toasted, and charred barrels, it will usually be at least express a little bit drier than bourbon. Like I said, with long or good fermentations, you also get some apple notes. They can get really complex. They can actually sometimes be as big as the spice. Spice is the real thing, though, that distillers use rye for. It can help balance out sweetness in other places, and it also has enough complexity that it's kind of
And it's why you'd probably put this in many an American cocktail. So something like, I don't know. Have you got any recommendations that you would definitely use this for as a cocktail?
Manhattan, for sure. This sweet vermouth, stir down, bit of bitters, dynamite.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit culturally biased because I am from Toronto, but the Toronto cocktail, so it's rye. So if you're gonna make it home, it's like 15 mils rye, about 10 to 15 mils Fernet Branca, which is a very, very bitter. It's not a people pleaser. It's a Marmite, a Marmite bitter thing.
I like medicinal flavors, so I love that stuff.
And it's also like 10 mils is not enough to, I think, offend anybody, but that and then maple syrup, and you stir that down, and this makes the best Toronto for sure.
Can we make a nice Sazerac with this? That's my absolute favorite.
Oh yeah, definitely. I would say go full rye, because sometimes Sazeracs are half cognac, half rye. You can by all means split them if you want. I think because they do the longer fermentation and there are all those apple notes, it definitely doesn't really need the extra sweetness. But yeah, this, any form of absinthe, dynamite.
Absolutely.
Picklebacks, I know it might be blasphemous to suggest a quasi high-end whiskey with pickle brine, but from personal experience, very responsibly drinking personal experience, picklebacks with this work very, very well as well.
Okay. Responsibly pour and sip, everybody. It's responsibility. Exactly. But yeah, absolutely. Just a few notes are coming in. So green tea is green saying gentler nose of the Michters, not quite so fruity as the Never Say Die. Absolutely. Well, we're getting a much spicier, more savoury nose as well, but there is absolute sweetness underneath. There's absolute toffee apple kind of notes that are there as well. There's those big kinds of jammy notes that are underneath as well.
Toffee apple's a good one. It actually smells like, if you've ever been to this is might be a North American thing, but you go to like the equivalent of a carnival sometimes, and they'll be dunking the apples in the coffee.
No, we get
that smell.
It's in America. It's quite a Halloween kind of thing as well.
It's exactly Halloween.
Yeah. Like that's what I get on the nose there as well. But it's right underneath that wonderful rye spice that kind of. It's not like a classic, it's not smacking you in the face, that spice, those black pepper notes as well. It's right there. It's balanced. It's really, really lovely.
I'm going to steal that tasting note for my future tasting. Thank you.
You're welcome. I should have patented it. I copyrighted that one. Steve Coleman Williams. Oh, I think it's a bit more obvious than traditional nose. Was literally about to say it. Jeff's a pear drops on the nose and a bit of fresh mown hay. Malcolm Tucker knows Cadbury's Curly Whirly. You've been here long enough to know what Cadbury Curly Whirly is, right?
Oh, do you want to hear something? This is a bit scientific. You want to hear something messed up?
Fine. Yeah, go for it. I love messed up.
One of the things they put into some forms of large-scale commercial chocolate production is this thing called, I forget who says what, butyric or butyric acid.
Okay.
North Americans say one thing, British say the other. But it is, if you've ever been around a baby and it's they're breastfeeding, it's milk vomit. It's that acid.
Yeah.
When you get that in fermentation, and it's in the presence of the stuff in wood that breaks the hemocellulose and lignin that break down over time, it will chemically chain into something almost identical to tobacco, fermented tobacco.
Okay.
So this thing that starts off as like weird, kind of slightly pukey, becomes appley peary notes, then it actually gets a little bit worse in the interim, and then becomes this really weird, very pleasant, like dark tobacco note.
And this is something we can expect to find in...
Well, you have to leave it in the barrel for a long time.
Okay.
So I would say if you're looking for tobacco, you're probably looking at some of the older Michter, so 10 years plus.
Sure.
But yeah, if you ever get those pear and apple notes, are sometimes a hint, because it's a couple things that make those smells.
Yeah.
So it's a hint that you'll get those big, complex, kind of like sweet tobacco notes on an older version of that product.
We love messed up here, and we love interesting notes and things to fight. So that definitely fits into that bracket. And the apple note is there, as Malcolm Tucker as well, saying sawn wood with light undertone of apple. Anthony Mullins getting a lovely, creamy, buttery toffee on the nose. Ali C saying Curly Whirly is a great shout. Clive Hampton, a definite rye, gentler nose and Never Say Die, and a bit sharper. Steve Coleman Williams, Werther's Originals and pears on the nose. Good note. Richard Wingrove getting toffee and a bit of fruitiness. Green tea is green. It's curious how often Werther's Originals crops up on the nose. There you go. Oh, that's a great sound there, Mikey. I love that sound.
Well, Werther's Original, of course, is also toffee. It's one of the things that
well. That's exactly it. James Kern nose reminds me of roasted caramelized pears. Wow. I don't think I've had roasted caramelized.
I feel like I don't live a fancy enough life. I've never had.
Yeah, so I don't think I've had those, but they sound great, I have to say. Steve Coleman Williams, I get fresh underripe pear. Interesting. Jess, I know I'm drinking. You got the finish, but after the Never Say Die, the taste is someone having said that there's a very long finish, especially if you close your mouth and suck your cheeks in. There you go.
Ryes tend to have longer finishes, not always, but good. And from my personal point of view, the good ones tend to have that spice will kind of peter out and become almost like if you're used to scotches, when you get that kind of like linseed, linoleum stuff from lowland scotches, they'll hang around. And
yeah, I mean,
in a pleasant way.
Absolutely. And people saying about the black pepper finish, Anti-Mal is more subtle than the Never Say Die. Yeah, and I'm getting treacle tart with a black pepper finish. Richard Wingrove, I'm getting a bit of aniseed, I think, a hint of Pernod in there for me. That's you're going to absolutely get that with the rice spice. You get that kind of linseedy kind of thing. That's
so one of the things I'll say, actually, hearing that, because the ryes are single barrel, I've been asked before if they change a lot, barrel to bottle to bottle, batch to batch, and they don't change hugely. But one of the things I've noticed from the stuff where I started a year ago to the stuff we're having now, the spice sometimes changes. So when I first had it, it was like on top of the black pepper, you get like sarsaparilla, almost like root beery notes. And now it's become more anise, like star anise. I tend not to mention it because if people don't like fennel or that kind of flavor, they'll really pull back from it. But
I love fennel.
That tweak to the spice is the thing that changes, which I like a lot.
Yeah.
It's a great element of this rye, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're definitely getting that particularly on the finish of this. Again, Ali C is saying it's very smooth, especially for rye, smooth vanilla and butterscotch before the rye pepperiness sneaks in on finish. Real Boinga, taste thick, smooth, spicy caramel. Colin Bucket, this is lovely. The pour and sip store is beckoning. Remember, guys, if you do head to the pour and sip store and buy one of the bottles you've seen from tonight that you really like, you will be able to get our pour and sip members discount. Green tea is green. I taste what you mean by the aniseedy, almost medicinal taste. Curious combination with the mild sweetness of the initial taste. Absolutely. It's a wonderful thing, I have to say. Malcolm Tucker palates start with burnt sugar, cereal notes, black pepper on the tip of my tongue, ending on licorice. All sorts. Loads and loads of notes coming in on this one. And Steve Gunn Williams is saying there's a gap in the market there. Baby puke whiskey.
That's my next endeavor.
Absolutely. I'm not sure how much that's going to take off. I might hold you back from that. Richard Wingrove, I've restrained myself from buying anything off the store for a few months, but these last two have been pretty interesting. Will fill a gap in my drinks cabinet. And lastly, Real Boinga saying this is the finish of the continuation of the slightly fruity caramel. I absolutely love this. And just going back to Michter's in general, so you've got the bourbon, the sour mash, the rye. Are there other things that they're doing, like kind of interesting bottles, or do they really stick to that core, or there's single barrel releases that are coming out in this country that could be?
There are aged releases, so you'll see aged bourbon and aged rye coming out. They also do a thing called toasted barrel versions of their whiskey. So the one that came out this year was a toasted barrel sour mash. Okay. So you basically take the product that you've already got, you then add that again to a barrel that has just been toasted without the char on the inside. Usually for a matter of months and not years. So you've got a 5 to 6 year old product and it goes into a toasted barrel again. It always adds this kind of like, if you've ever had Japanese oak, like Mizunara, it has this like incensey top note to it. Because it's American oak, you also get these really big sweet nutty notes to it. So they come out when they're ready. I think it's probably one going to come out before Christmas. I guess the toasted barrel sour mash came out earlier this year. So they do interesting releases. They also have a Shanks and a Baumburgers release, which come out as and when they're ready, based on some of the earlier mash bills from the previous companies. But all of them are I work for the company, pinch of salt, but all of them are very good. Yeah. I've not had a single one where I haven't been like, there's a reason to buy this one.
Yeah, that's right. And there's you're saying about the age zone, it's the 10-year-old bourbon.
Yeah, those have bourbon hunters all over them. Michter's did a good job. I was even doing I forget where I was doing a tasting somewhere for a completely different whiskey. But people had heard that Waterford had released a 10-year-old, which I think was about 6 months ago, and they were just going shop to shop. I was in London Bridge somewhere, and they're going shop to shop trying to find them. So if you like Michter's, it's worth getting. I've got one. I purchased one of the 10-year-olds before working for this company, which I'm very happy with. Yeah, they're not impossible to find, but if you want them, if you see it, you got to buy it because they'll disappear.
There you go, guys. It's like a mildly rare Pokemon. that you're trying to get there, the 10-year-old. And Alice, sorry, might have missed this. Is this sourced or blended or distilled by Michters?
Distilled by Michters. All the
Distilled
stuff.
by Michters, all on site.
The only stuff that will be there's no more of the source stuff, so the stuff they bought barrels of. There's a little bit of the contract distilled stuff. They released a 25-year-old sour mash, which was one of the contract distilled things I thought was particularly good this year. And it's one of those special, comes in a massive case, golden fireworks shootout things. But everything else that you buy is from Michters, from their actual distilleries now.
Awesome. Well, it's been lovely to talk to you, Mikey, and that was a wonderful dram to try. Absolutely love that stuff. I'm going to invite Jess back onto screen. Did you get to try that?
Yes, that was lovely.
Yeah,
I feel like we've done this in a really good order as well. Also, learnt a new cocktail that I had not heard of before.
The Canadian. What was it called again?
Toronto. Yeah.
The Toronto. Okay, that's one that we might, our Pour and Sip readers usually want to know the recipes for those ones. So you might have to give us that to write in our Pour and Sip newsletters.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, lovely stuff. Thank you very much, Mikey, for talking to us. So, cool. 2 down.
Yeah. And now we are leaving the world of rye and bourbon.
Yes, we are. And we're heading over to something completely different in Campbeltown. My favourite of the Scottish regions.
Is it?
Yeah, well, we talk about Glengyle, so we talk about Springbank and Kilkerran, so yeah, very much so.
Do you have to say that when I'm on the call?
No, you can look at the shelf
As
there.
you came into shop.
Yeah, I can see some of the colours there.
And so, yeah, that's the Campbeltown shelf. Anyway, carry on. Yes, I will leave you in the capable hands of Jess, Fiona, and I will see you all soon.
Cool.
Amazing. Well, last but certainly not least, we are here with finally in Scotland. Yeah, how have you been? Oh, I guess you didn't have the other drams to taste, do you? That's such a shame.
No, but I did make a little whiskey sour while I was waiting.
Oh my god, yum!
There was all this talk of cocktails, so I was just tempted.
Very nice. And the sun was out, so I feel like it sort of hits different than like an old fashioned, probably.
That's it. Yeah, it's a good excuse.
Amazing. Well, yeah, thank you so much for coming and chatting with me. This is such an interesting whiskey, and I can't wait to talk about it. But first of all, let's find out a bit about you. I mean, because obviously this is but the whiskey we're going to taste is a blend of multiple distilleries. So, which are you with?
Yeah, so it can be quite a difficult whiskey to talk about sometimes in detail because you start talking about all these different places and all these different production processes. But yeah, I work in the sales team for both Springbank and Kilkerran, or Glengyle. For anyone who's not familiar, Glengyle is the name of the distillery, Kilkerran's the name of the whiskey, just to confuse things even further. But yeah, both of those distilleries are owned by J&A Mitchell, which is a family business in Campbeltown. So we've got 3 distilleries in Campbeltown: Springbank, Glengyle, and then there's Glen Scotia, which is sort of separate to us.
Okay, amazing. And how did you get into the whiskey world?
Yeah, really just a case of sort of looking for a job in the right place at the right time, which is not very sentimental, but I grew up in Campbeltown. I'm from Campbeltown.
Oh, okay.
So I had a sort of vague insight into the whiskey industry, I suppose, and I knew it was quite a big thing in Campbeltown because you'd meet a lot of tourists who came here to visit the distilleries and things.
Yeah.
But I left Campbeltown after I left school, and I went to Glasgow and studied and worked there for the best part of 10 years, really.
Oh, okay.
And then when lockdown hit, I moved back home here to Campbeltown because I could work from home. And then there started being this talk of going back to the office, and I thought, I don't think I want to leave here again.
Yeah.
So I started looking for a job here, and it was actually a job advertised with Cadenheads. So for anyone who doesn't know, Cadenheads is an independent bottler in Campbeltown, owned again by that same paint company. So I applied to that, and long story short, I was sort of pivoted into the Springbank Glengyle team instead.
Okay.
And that was like just over 2 years ago, so I'm fairly new to the whiskey industry.
Fairly. it's a feral stint.
Yeah, a lot can happen.
People that have, since they were like 14 or something, somehow.
Yeah. But I was new to whiskey in general, so I didn't drink whiskey when I started either.
Same as me with my job, to be fair.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a like, you can't complain. It's a good thing to learn about.
I feel like that Campbeltown whiskey might be quite an intense sort of style to be plunged in at the deep end with as well.
In some ways, it probably is. My only experience of whiskey really leading up to working in the industry was like, at an after party at the end of the night when there was nothing else left, and they'd give you like famous grouse or something. And yeah, I wasn't really sure whether I was going to like it or not, but I think certainly the quality with Campbeltown whiskey is really high. And having that as the start of your whiskey journey, you're maybe kind of spoiled a little bit.
Yeah.
I've tried loads of other amazing whiskies as well, but it is quite a kind of particular style, and you do become used to that and kind of what's familiar, I suppose.
Yeah, I imagine if it's what you sort of learn to love, you've set the precedent for everything else.
That's it. It's hard to kind of veer away from that. And that's actually something I'm trying to do a bit more of now. Like, as I say, being fairly new to the industry, first couple of years was like trying to visit distilleries and trying to just understand the process. Working at a distillery where they do everything on site, you're trying to figure it all out a little bit, like how they do the maltings and distillation and all that. But more recently, I'm like trying to kind of broaden my horizons a little bit in terms of what I'm actually trying and not sticking to my Campbeltown roots.
Well, yeah, we've had some inspirational bourbons tonight and rye, so
sound pretty good.
On maybe. We've got just on the chat, we've got Ali saying, like, Springbank even need a sales team. That stuff flies off the shelves.
we get that a lot, Ali. When I tell people I'm a salesperson for Springbank, they're like, "What do you actually do?" But yeah, when I went for my interview, that's something they sort of brought up. Where they just said it's not maybe your sort of typical sales job. It's probably a lot of monitoring where it goes and how it's sold. As you maybe know as well, we have quite an issue with people sort of flipping our whiskey for profit, and we want to deter that as much as possible and get it to people who are actually going to drink and enjoy the whiskey. So that is quite a big part of what we do in the sales team, is monitoring how it's distributed, I suppose. Yeah, monitoring pricing, and often it can be almost like, we've been doing more traveling recently, sort of after COVID, and we often get the question, is it worthwhile coming to whatever market it is we've gone to when there's not a huge sales push needed? But it's really just getting out and sort of telling the story about Springbank for those who are not so familiar. Making sure we're sort of, I suppose, explaining the situation that we're in and why it is that way at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, speaking of, move on to some whiskey. So I think this is quite an intriguing whiskey just in general, because bringing together, so Campbeltown only has 3 distilleries. And this is a way to sample them all in one delicious drop, really. But I can imagine, some people might think that that's almost sacrilegious, given that many Campbeltown distilleries have such a cult following. But, what was sort of the process like behind this release? And
so we've done Campbeltown Loch releases in the past, like years and years ago, and it used to be a blended whiskey with grain whiskey as well. This time, the kind of revival of Campbeltown Loch, it's a blended malt. And yeah, what you said is true. We do sort of we'll get people coming into the shop, and when they hear that Campbeltown Loch is a blend, they'll sort of move on to single malt and go into Springbank 10 or Kilkenny 12 or things like that. But we have found that when people actually try Campbeltown Loch, they do really like it. It's a really high quality blend, and as you say, it's like a way to kind of sample like Campbeltown as a region, because it's very typical of the region. You really get a sort of maritime note, a kind of coastal note with it.
Yeah.
For anyone who's not familiar, Campbeltown's a peninsula, so surrounded by water, and we produce everything on site in Campbeltown as well. So it's really influenced by where we are in the world, and I think that really comes through nicely in the whisky. So yeah, we've got our 3 distilleries, and there's 5 single malts produced in the town. So again, you've got Glen Scotia, you've got Kilkerran produced at Glengyle, and then Springbank produces 3, so Hazelburn, Longrow and Springbank. And this one that I'm drinking anyway, depends on the batch. There's been sort of variations between the batches, but the one I have is the most recent one, and it was kind of predominantly made up of unpeated Kilkerran. So there's going to be slight differences between the batches, and I think even that's quite interesting. You can sort of compare and decide on favourites, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah, I think I was told today that our batch, actually, I don't know if we can find out what batch our one is, but how do they change quite regularly?
Not too regularly. There's really been one big difference, and that was in the first release, and then the one after that. And I'm sure when I was speaking to someone about the tasting, and they mentioned that you had both batches, but I'm not sure which one went out in the.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm trying to find that out now. Okay.
You can tell by looking at them which one it is, because the first one was much lighter than the second one.
Oh, I was thinking earlier this looked quite dark.
Yeah, that looks similar to what I have here, which is the darker one.
Okay, well, cheers.
Cheers.
I think for me, this is such a really lovely balance of like that coastalness you were talking about. But I wouldn't say it's overwhelmingly savoury at all. Like there's a really, like, it's almost the sweetness that makes you want to go back for more, but the savouriness that makes it sort of really complex and, I don't know, unique actually.
Yeah, there is definitely a sweetness as well. One of the notes that quite often comes up is salted caramel. So it is almost that like kind of saltiness from the coast, but then the sweetness of the caramel. It's very drinkable.
Yeah, really drinkable. But I think sometimes people might think that if you describe a whiskey as sort of savoury and coastal, I think people have an idea about it, and it wouldn't sort of come across as being that drinkable, to be honest. I mean, is there a way of sort of identifying which whiskies from which distilleries sort of bring certain notes to the whiskey?
It depends on which one, I suppose. For Springbank and Kilkerran, they're both very fruity whiskies. I always think Kilkerran, a very typical tasting note is citrus fruits. It's a lot of kind of lemon and lime. Springbank's very much sort of orchard fruits, tropical fruits even. Sometimes I get sort of coconut notes with Springbank as well. But we do, for both distilleries, a very long fermentation. It's like up to 110 hours. So it gives it that sort of fruity character. And I'm sure there'll probably be some people on the tasting that will have heard about the Springbank Funk, which is a tasting note that comes up. And there's not really a way of putting your finger on it, but there's something funky with Springbank. That's maybe not really selling it, but
it's got to be like tasted to be believed.
Yeah.
But what's that from? I mean, funk is such like a distinctive flavour, but
yeah, it's probably quite difficult to pinpoint. We've used very kind of old equipment, and we've got a very old traditional distillery. One thing is it's all old wooden washbacks, and some of them have been there between sort of 30 and 40 years. Okay. So that question is sometimes raised. As I say, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is, but that sometimes comes up as a potential cause of the funk.
But I mean, you don't want to change anything to find out, do you?
That's it. We've got 3 stills on site, and we'll be replacing them, I think, in the next year or so. But that's something that's come up, is making sure that they're exactly the same, really, the same shape and the same character, so that nothing's changed. It's like, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yes, exactly. I've just been informed that, the Campbeltown that we have is 2 batches. Some are 22,196 and others are 22,231.
Ah, right, okay.
That doesn't mean much to me, I have to say. But yes, for anyone who was wondering, tasting along with us, we can try and figure out from the colour maybe as well. We got some amazing tasting notes coming through as well. Oh my gosh, there are loads. We have Clive says light peat and smoke on the nose, but it's quite subtle, and his looks like a rosé wine. Jeff Stir, Spanish Gold, sweet tobacco on the nose, a slight whiff of burnt rubber tire on a burnout. Very evocative, I like that. Malcolm Tucker, sitting next to a rock pool, eating a chopped ham and pork luncheon meat sandwich with bonfire smoke wafting from the end of the beach. That sounds like the beginning of a story.
Yeah, bonfire smoke, bonfires, toasted marshmallows is something that we get quite a lot. For our long row, which is our heavily peated in particular, it's quite a sort of subtle peat smoke, but that's quite often what comes up because there's quite a sweetness to it. So it's like, the kind of coastal side of it, and then the sweetness of the marshmallows, and then the kind of smokiness of the bonfire.
Yeah. So you've got sort of like the fruitiness and that tropical note from the fermentations, but what about the sort of cask recipe as well?
So for Campbeltown Loch anyway, they've never sort of, I suppose, released exactly what the makeup of it is. And the first release, I know it was sort of heavier on Glen Scotia than the current release that we've got. And then, as I say, this one's a lot of unpeated Kilkerran, which is quite interesting because Kilkerran is typically lightly peated, it's about 10 ppm. We release a heavily peated Kilkerran a couple of times per year, but we've never ever released an unpeated Kilkerran. So it's quite interesting, and I've actually never tried it because, as I say, we've never released it, but it'd be good to try the unpeated and see if you're getting that sort of character coming through in this whiskey.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, sorry, I'm still reading the tasting notes as well. We've got sweet and salty all the way through. Carl, pleasantly smoky on the nose, but it's really smooth and a lovely dram. Real Boingo agrees with salted caramel totally. And Ali thinks that the curly whirly notes are still stuck in their head. This is like a salted crunchy bar left next to a peat fire. I really enjoy that tasting note, actually.
Yeah, that actually sounds really appealing.
Yeah, that sounds lovely, like just melting slowly by the side. I was going to ask as well, do you know the proportions of each whiskey in this blend?
No, so as I say, they've never sort of said exactly the proportions of what's in it, and
you could make
it will sort of, you could maybe pick it out a bit more clearly. But as I say, it has changed quite a bit in the last two, and I think the plan is it'll become a little bit more consistent. But no, in short, don't know the exact proportions.
I guess as well, this maybe is a more accessible way for people to try some of the whiskies in the blend as well. I mean, did that come into sort of the creation of this release?
Yeah, I mean, I was just sort of thinking about that myself. It's really over the last, as I say, I've been there about 2 years, and the demand was already quite high when I started. So I guess maybe over the last 4 years or so that the demand's really shot up significantly for Campbeltown whiskies. And it does lead to quite a lot of frustration for customers and maybe a little bit of resentment to the distillery. And I can completely understand and appreciate that frustration, especially if you've been a long time drinker and all of a sudden you can no longer get your hands on one of your favourite whiskies. So yeah, we do as many things as we can to try and make them accessible. So things like making a Campbeltown Loch blend so that if you go to a shop and there's no Campbeltown single malt left, you can still access Campbeltown whiskey in some way. And yeah, we do other little things to try and deter people from flipping the bottles. You're never going to 100% be able to police that or tell people what they're allowed to do with the bottles that they've bought. But we like to remind people that we're sort of very hyper conscious of it and doing what we can. We want people encouraging it. So it's good to do these things as well when people have got a sample. To at least be able to try it when it's not always easy to buy.
Yeah, that's true actually. We we've got some, as New Zealanders are saying, this go beautifully with a plate of oysters.
Mm.
But a few people as well commenting on sort of the nature of the smoke. Colin is saying that the smoke is subtle and totally different from Isla smoke, for example. But I mean, I'm just sort of wondering obviously places are not the same, but being both coastal, what is the difference in the smokiness, I suppose? Because, you talk about peated Scotch, people will jump to Isla.
Mm-hmm.
But what is it that gives Campbeltown sort of like that point of difference?
Yeah, so we don't use local peat. Our peat comes from Inverness. So we've got two sources sort of up near Inverness, one for our dry and one for our wet peat. And that's what quite often comes up, especially if you get people who come and do a whisky tour and they go to Isla first and then come to Campbeltown, and they're used to these really big, sort of bold, very smoky, sort of that kind of iodine medicinal quality of peat. And then they come to Campbeltown and try our heavily peated Long Row, and it, as you say, is quite subtle and there's quite a sweet peat smoke influence. So yeah, the source of the peat, and also our sort of peatiest whiskey is about 45 to 50 ppm, so it's not quite on the same level as some of the Isla whiskies. But yeah, when I started at the distillery and when I started drinking whiskey, I tried the Long Row and I quite liked it.
Yeah.
And I was surprised because I thought, I didn't really think I'd like peated whiskey. And then I went to a whiskey show and I tried, I actually can't even remember what it was now, but it was a heavily peated one from Isla. And I was like, now I've tried peated whiskey.
Oh, okay. I used to ease you in a bit.
Yeah, maybe now would be okay, but as a newcomer, it was quite a shock.
Yeah. Yeah, I was eased in with like bourbon and stuff. I feel like some people, they're like, the first whiskey I tried was an Ardbeg and I've loved it ever since. But like, I took the easy road.
Yeah, build up to it.
Yeah. Would I think as well, because most people probably wouldn't put Springbank in a cocktail, but this is quite like a really good value bottling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of wondering, being a blended malt, what you would you use this in a cocktail, do you reckon?
Yeah, well, I just did.
Oh, that was, yeah, of course.
That's what I used. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Even sometimes, kind of anything we use, sometimes people question putting it in a cocktail, but particularly with Springbank, the target market, I suppose, is more typical single malt whiskey drinkers. And then if you go to Kilkerran, because it's a little bit newer and I suppose a little bit more versatile, we'll do some cocktails with that. So at our Malts Festival, which we do in May each year,
Yes.
we always do a Kilkerran cocktail masterclass, which we probably wouldn't do, as you say, with Springbank. And then, yeah, this is a lovely whiskey in its own, but I think it goes nicely in a cocktail as well from this one that I've tried.
From this whiskey sour that I just whipped up. Love that. Amazing. Well, I think, I could go deep into Campbeltown. Time is flying. So I wonder if Andy will fly back on screen.
Suddenly appear.
Amazing. Thank you so
If
much.
you say his name 5 times on the screen, he will appear. Not in a creepy candy.
He doesn't, then his internet.
Yeah, I absolutely loved that. Absolutely love that. That is right up my street. I just love that Campbeltown funk was there. And it's
Yeah.
wonderful for me.
You'll need to get that added onto the shelf behind
That
you.
is going on the shelf, sure, and it's going to be easier to get, hopefully, than some of the stuff on that shelf.
Yeah.
But recently, there's the Kilkerran, the batch of the 8-year-old, the
sherry.
the sherry one. That was, honestly,
Yeah.
I tried to get the second batch as well, and I managed to find someone who found it for me. Second batch wasn't as good, I have to say, as the first batch, which was absolutely incredible. First batch.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I feel like I've spoken a lot about my sort of getting into whiskey, but that's the first one that I tried that I remember really thinking, I could enjoy this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I remember we were at Glasgow Whisky Festival and we were very last minute. We were trying the whiskies that we had there. And one of them was the Kilkenny 8-year-old sherry. So that would have been from 2022. And I just remember a sort of orange rind note on the nose, and I was like, Yeah,
it's one of the ones I always use as well. When people say that younger whiskies aren't as good, and I'm just like, try this.
Yeah.
Literally try this. Right, I'm very, very aware of time. Thank you so much, Fiona. If you want to stick around, me and Jess are going to do a very, very short whistle stop tour of these last 2 drams, so we'll speak to you soon.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona.
Right. I am aware of time, guys. This has been wonderful talking to our 3 guests. So I think we should very, very quickly do a whistle stop tour of our last 2 drams.
Well, kick us off with Boulder.
What am I talking about? Boulder, which is something I hadn't heard of, I have to say.
No.
I realised we were doing it for pour and sip. But it is coming from the foothill of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. And this is a lightly peated American single malt. So these are obviously becoming more popular. It's worth noting there's about quite a few distilleries now that are venturing into this American single malt whiskey realm. And each of them have their different approaches to creating whiskey. And there's many countries around the world, but the United States obviously utilizes virgin American oak as a standard, which is what a Boulder Spirits, they believe, is their true defining characteristic of American whiskey. And it was actually founded by a Scotsman, Alistair Brogan, who moved to the States in 2012 with his mission to make an American single malt whiskey. And luckily he moved with a 1,500 gallon Forsyth pot still, which is apparently the biggest in the whole state, and started to use it to distill in 2015. And this is their smoky release. And it's distilled entirely from malted barley and matured in charred virgin American white oak barrels. So that is a little bit about the Boulder peated American single malt.
Very nice. And then we'll have him back over to Scotland for Kingsbarns Ducot, which
love that name.
It's so cool. Do you know what it means?
I don't, and I'm looking forward to finding out. But it also just sounds like a nice word just to say.
It sounds like it would sound even nicer in a Scottish accent, to be honest. Well, a Ducot is it's like the name for a nesting shelter for doves and pigeons. And at Kingsbarns Distillery, there is a 200-year-old Ducot, which doesn't house any doves or pigeons, but the first cask of whiskey that was ever filled at the distillery.
Okay.
The Ducot is the follow-up to the flagship release, Dream to Dram, which, if you've been with us long enough, you will have tried about a year ago or so in pour and sip. And there's a bit more STR, shaved, toasted and recharred wine casks in this edition, so it's a little older and it's also a little richer and spicier. But that sort of Kingsbarns DNA of tropical fruit and sort of lowland florals is definitely still running through it. So very different from a smoky American single malt for sure, but equally delicious.
Yes, awesome. So I think on that note, we should invite all our guests back if they are still here.
Oh, someone's just informed me it's pronounced Ducot.
Yes.
With Colin. Thank you, Colin.
Yes. Martha is back. Thank you for sticking in through the journey. Mikey might be back. I'll add him if his screen appears. And Fiona, who's briefly been off for a quick little respite there. Just a couple more. Yeah, a Dovecot and pronounced Ducot. There you go. I learned that as well. Okay, brilliant. And Colin Barker saying, I dream of one day getting my hands on a reasonably priced Springbank 15. It's beautiful. Don't forget that they are reasonably priced, and that's the one thing at standard retail. They are completely reasonably priced. Obviously, we have to get them on the secondary market. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us. One thing we like to ask our guests as well, before I'm going to ask a really horrible question to our listeners. So, Jess, do you want to just ask that question first?
Right, well, we have a nice chat. We're going to ask all of our pour and sippers to pick a favourite, please. And as always, we're being mean, and you can't say all 3 because that's the easiest answer and probably the one that everyone would say. Yeah. So, and last time I did this, a few people said all 3, and I'm not having it again.
Yeah. Guys, stop sitting on the fence. Whiskey's amazing, and they're all amazing whiskies, but choose your favourite.
Yeah, obviously they're all fabulous. That's why we pick them.
It goes without saying that they're all really nice.
So then, talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Talk amongst yourselves. Let us know, and we'll read them out. So I always like asking because we always talk about the brands that you guys are talking about, brand blah blah blah. What are you drinking at the moment? What's hit you by surprise? Something that you've really caught your eye, or something really nice that you tried recently? Martha, we'll start with you.
Oh, I think some of the Four Roses releases have been really, really great. And I definitely kind of started when I used to visit America a lot, drinking quite a lot of Four Roses, and I think some of the stuff that they've been releasing recently is just really, really great. It's a kind of real classic bourbon. That's amazing.
I absolutely love Four Roses, and the special releases of the small batch are stuff to really, if you are going to fork out on a really special bottle of something, I think those are absolutely amazing.
Definitely. I think if you get to go to a whiskey show, then you can just go over to their stand and, just delve into the depths of what they've got.
Or that. Or if you're just going to try something really kind of and someone says to me, can you recommend me a good bourbon? It's often one of the ones that I would use as a go-to, as like an absolute classic. Absolutely. What about you, Fiona? That's not on Campbeltown.
Well, I'm not going too far from home. I'm going to Isla with this.
Okay.
But I like Kilchoman, and I really like their 100% Isla, which is probably not venturing too far from our own sort of style overall, and that's maybe why I do like it, is that kind of familiarity. But it's a really nice sort of accessible Isla whiskey, I think.
Absolutely. Jess, what about you? You went to White Peak, so you should probably say that.
I did, yes. I mean, to be fair, I actually tried the new White Peak Kuduro quite recently, and that was lovely. So I'm going to say that.
Awesome. That looked like a very, very nice trip. Do you want to start reading with these notes? Our guests will not be offended. I don't know that. Martha, will you be offended if someone doesn't choose Never Say Die?
No. I think, the whole point of whiskey is you need to, drink what you love.
That's exactly. We have to say here that it's clearly a silly question, but it's one that we like.
I would say Martha does not have much to worry about, because Never Say Die is currently raking in the votes.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't mind what you choose. I don't mind. All whiskey's good. Never Say Die is winning. Right.
Yeah, we've got Steve Hickson, Never Say Die, Malcolm Tucker, Never Say Die, TSCD, Campbeltown, Green Tears Green, Never Say Die by a nose from Campbeltown. So they were dying to say both. Richard Woodford, Never Say Die, Steve Colin Williams. Can't believe he's saying this, but the bourbon, so Never Say Die has taken it for him. Colin, Campbeltown, Carl Wilcock, also Campbeltown. Maybe it's a tie. Mick just has a vote from Clive. Go, Clive.
Big up, Clive. He's decided to go with the Michters, the kind of the curveball one, clearly in this kind of. I think it's because our guests are still on the screen. I don't know. That was a question there.
The blonde women on the screen. That's what
that's exactly it. And they feel bad now. They feel bad. If Mikey had returned, everyone would have said Michters. But anyway, thank you so much to everybody for joining us tonight. It's been a wonderful evening, as always, on these Pour and Sip tastings. Thank you so much, Martha, for sticking around and for chatting to us about all things Never Say Die. That is a really interesting story, and I really loved that whiskey. Well, I'm sure a few of us will be heading to the Pour and Sip store to buy that one. Thank you, Fiona, for joining us from Campbeltown. Wonderful stuff. Thank you to Mikey, talking us all things Michters. Thank you, Jess. I suppose you won't be here next month, right? You're doing your one in, one off.
I don't know. Well, you're keeping you on your toes, You know
Will she? Won't she? We'll see next week, next time.
I mean, thank you, Andy. As usual, it's lovely to see you through the screen.
Yes, through the screen, absolutely. And you two can just actually go for a drink with each other now.
Yeah, it's great.
So anyway, thank you very much. We'll see you in August. As always, I don't know the date. I probably do, but I can't remember.
I'll find it for you right now. Super duper quick. It is the 10th.
The 10th of August.
10th of August, everyone, get it in your diaries.
Yeah, so we will see you on the 10th of August for more whiskey fun. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you then. Cheers.